I usually start off these videos with multiple phases. I usually start off with the first half, which is me talking about something in the intro, and then me getting into the presentation and the initial things I got when I first saw it, and then the overall, I guess, experience over the course of episodes and the ending phase or the ending portion of the show, and then I talk about a little bit of everything else, and then talk about the entire consensus of my uh, experience thus far, like the entire summary of what I watched, basically. So before I start off with uh, before I started with anything in relation to the episodes or anything like that, I'll just get straight into the overall presentation and what I got from the show, basically. The first idea I had in my head when reading the name of the season, I thought it was going to be the fact that our main character here was going to train and become a Hashira, right? That was my first interpretation of this whole thing. And then I thought he was going to go and become a Hashira or go into the trainings of a Hashira. That's about it for the most part in terms of presentation. It's what I would expect from this season, and it's what I basically wanted. Just a season focused on the Hashira, and that is what the presentation went with in terms of the cover. Now, what about the show? Like, what about, before we get into the show, what about the opening, right? I think this time around, the opening definitely focuses, like I said, on the Hashira specifically. It focuses on the characters and the Hashira this time around. It's very interesting what they did with the opening. I think it's not my favorite opening, but it's nice what is in the opening. I think it's definitely a good opening, I would say. Is it my favorite? No, but I will say that it is a good opening for sure. I think the animation this time around is definitely a lot better than what I thought of the previous season. The previous season was definitely good animation wise. I think all of them are. It's just this one has the season 2 flair I was talking about, where you can tell there's a lot of thought put into this. They're trying to, I think, get it right this time, and you can definitely tell. Like, there's a lot of, well, I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm not gonna talk about that yet, but I will just talk about the episodes in particular, just the episodes, and I'll talk about just pretty much everything after the presentation. So pretty much overall, the presentation is really good. Now, as for the episodes are very interesting in terms of their structures. They focus more on the introduction of the Hashiras, and in terms of who they are, what they do, I guess their schedules, because they all, I guess, focus on a specific training regimen, whether it's flexibility, physical strength, and endurance. Like, they focus on specific traits of a person, and their entire purpose is to train a slayer to be able to handle an upper moon. Like, they train you to be strong, right? So that is the whole point of this training. And this is a very interesting way of structuring each episode because it keeps you there. There's a lot of things that keep you in this season, such as character chemistry, the wholesomeness of certain scenes. There's a lot of things that happen here. I'll get into exactly that. So episode 1 is a very interesting episode as it introduces us to two Hashira that we haven't really seen before. We have seen them before, but they haven't really been in action before. So the first episode starts off directly with the Snake Hashira and the Wind Hashira, as they're slaying demons and, I guess, trying to save civilians. It is a very good episode as it introduces these Hashira and their abilities very well, and introduces the main force in this season, which is this teleporting, I don't know, like, it's like this hole that just appears and they fall into it, and it's just like this massive, I guess, I don't know how you call it, but it's just a bunch of like small rooms, and these Hashira fall into it. They almost are about to, but what essentially happens is that these demons escape through there. It's a very good episode, as it not only introduces the enemy force for the rest of the season, but also introduces the characters very well. So, in a nutshell, episode 1 introduces the snake and wind Hashira very well, and the force for the rest of the season, which is this I guess hole, right, that just appears and you fall in it essentially, and it's just a bunch of rooms there, and it is a very, very, very interesting way to structure for episode. So episode 2. The thing about episode 2 for me is that it's a very interesting structured episode again, because it shows the chemistry between Tanjiro and Giyu. There has been something similar to this in the anime in the first season, but this time around, I think it's more heavier, where they really display the relationship between Tanjiro and Giyu as they share a relationship over the water breathers before them. They discuss a lot about what Giyu is going through in this point of the story, which is the feeling of guilt and, I would say, hopelessness. He's feeling like regret over the fact that he's living while Sabito is dead. And he's essentially blaming himself, and he's saying that I'm not fit to be the water Hashira, when Sabito's entire reason as to him allowing him to live is to be the water Hashira. And it's a very interesting point, because that also makes people understand Tanjiro for once, where it's like he's a character that understands. He understands exactly what it's like to blame yourself, to feel regret, to feel a lot of these things that these characters go through. And I think it's good that Tanjiro is not a simple character to understand. He is a character that is very human. He has a lot of pieces that make him himself. It's very interesting. He has points where he gets angry. He has points where he starts to get emotional. He has a lot of points to his character, and it's very, very cool. So in this episode, it discusses a lot about Giyu's issues, and there's a lot of things that happen that Tanjiro causes that really focus on the bond that they have. So when Giyu is feeling down, Tanjiro tries to lighten up the mood. He tries to have a contest with him over, I guess, eating food, right? And it creates this chemistry that you'll notice in the episode. Like, Giyu doesn't want to eat. He would leave the food there, and then he'll come back and find the food gone. There's some really wholesome moments in this episode between Giyu and Tanjiro. It's very good. And in episode 3, right after, is another good episode, as it really displays the kind of person Tanjiro is, right? It's really something. To me, at least, he's a person that really tries to understand. And in episode 3, he understands the fact that he understands how they're feeling in response to the Stone Hashira's training. The Slayers decide that they want to take a more supportive role instead of having to take the front line. And Tanjiro's response to this is he understands. He understands that it's okay to be in the supportive role of things instead of having to be in the front lines where casualties can happen, right? And he's, boosting their morale. It feels like these Slayers aren't just NPCs, right? They may not have names, right? But it's like they are human, right? Like they actually bend under pressure. They actually react to this stuff, and his response is to boost their morale. And I will say episode 3 is my favorite, as it really showed me just who exactly Tanjiro is. It's just such a good episode to me. So episode 4 is very interesting, as it focuses on Muichiro, and he's very blunt, very harsh, but it's for good reason, as he is training demon slayers. But the train that he's doing is very, very intense, and as he focuses on Muichiro, as he is. So the Slayers are upset with Muichiro because of how harsh he's being with his training, and so they bring this up to Tanjiro. He decides to take this statement into account, and it's not just one Slayer saying this. it's all of the Slayers who are saying the fact that Muichiro's training is really, really harsh on them. In the episode, we also get a glimpse at what a Hashira sparring is, where basically two Hashiras are fighting each other. And in this episode, it's the Mist, Snake, and Wind Hashira who are basically fighting each other. And in this episode, there's a moment where Tanjiro has a airplane contest where they're essentially throwing airplanes and seeing which, I guess, flies the farthest. I'm not sure how this works exactly, but it is a very wholesome moment in the show, definitely. Episode 5 is very surprising because it starts off with Mitsuri. The way it starts off is very... It's not really surprising considering her character, but it is definitely something I did not expect. She essentially welcomes Tanjiro into her house and then she gives a greeting and then offers him food. But after they exchange words, she essentially asks him to change into an outfit. And man, this is the... I think this is where I always say like the wholesome moments in the season are very important, because it really reminds me of a time of peace. Because like the later episodes, you'll basically see what I'm saying. And so the point of her training the outfit to this outfit she gives him, and this outfit essentially focuses on their flexibility. So it's not just Tanjiro here, right? There are other Slayers with him as well. It's just he hasn't gotten to the area of the house where they're at. And so now that he's there, she essentially wants him to focus on his flexibility. And this is a very just wholesome scene in general, because essentially he's in pain, and it's supposed to be a funny scene because it's just like they're all in pain, complaining about how her flexible training is so intense. And what's funny is the fact that it's easy for her, but for them, it's like, it's just so difficult. So I thought that part of the episode was really good. But while this part of the episode is good, I think the other half is definitely a lot more interesting. So after completing his training, he returns to, I guess, the main area, where he's essentially greeted by the Snake Hashira, who's angry, and he's essentially complaining about the fact that he's enjoying his time in her training, and he believes that it's too much fun, and it looks as though he's jealous, basically. And so after sparring with the Snake Hashira, he essentially heads to Sanami. So before I get into that half, I just want to talk about his training in particular. The thing about his training is that it focuses, similarly to Muichiro's, is that it focuses on reaction time and speed. It's very interesting how it's set up. It's very interesting how it's set up, where it focuses on endurance and speed. Tanjiro is making sure that he doesn't hit the other Slayers that are, I guess, tied up on these, but they're tied up on them, and essentially he's not supposed to hit them because they're crying out in pain. That is pretty much the point, and he is supposed to hit the Snake Hashira, who is his opponent in this training. It goes from the training space that they're in to this space that they're just imagining themselves fighting in. And so the point of this fight, I guess, is to display how they're both on the same level at the end of this training session. Even though Tanjiro just started off with, barely holding his own in this, now he's able to fight with this guy as if they're on the same level and just avoid all of the bodies with ease. And so now they're just fighting like Slayers, basically. Just going all out. And that's pretty much the training. So after this, where he has Sanami, essentially he encounters Genya, but before he is able to greet him, that's where Sanami has an encounter with Genya. And after this, I guess a fight ensues, and essentially Tanjiro gets suspended from seeing Sanemi, which is very, I guess, like him to do, because he really, really, really wants to defend people. I'm not really surprised, but this is just within his character. But it's also within Sanemi's character to try and kill his own brother. But yes, he tries to kill his own brother because his brother explains to him that he ate demons, and Sanemi is very, very disappointed about that. In fact, he's disgusted. So he tries to kill his own brother, and then Tanjiro steps in the way. And he also attacks Sanemi, and thus getting himself suspended. Yep. And so now we head into episode 6, where Tanjiro is going under the training of the Stone Hashira. Probably my favorite part of this season, because it really gets to, I think, the best part. Like, the fact that this guy's voiced by Itachi's voice actor, right? Like, that is definitely a voice acting choice that I was looking forward to. I had no idea, but it was like a character that was like, man, I really want to see what this guy's voice is going to be like. And I think it's an interesting choice, and it is definitely a good choice, because the voice performance is really good. In this episode, it is also revealed who is the upper moon that is controlling this hole that appears whenever a guitar string is pulled. And it is Nakabe? I don't know how you say it. But she has one eye, and she can control these rooms. And she can basically play her guitar, and it opens. And Muzan is revealed, and it seems like they have some kind of relationship with each other, very similar to Daki's relationship with Muzan. It's very, very interesting, and it is also interesting how Muzan still wants to carry through with his plan to really get this, I believe it's the spider lily, something like that. He still wants to go through with that, and he still wants to go after Ubuyashiki. And I think it's because of the fact that Inosuke has conquered the sun last season, and because of Ubuyashiki's association with the core, and he wants to kill them to prevent them from getting in his way. Now we are on to the next half of the episode 6. So this season, there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of relationships, there's a lot of things being explained, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of stuff happening. This is my favorite part of this season in particular. Like, this is probably going to be the thumbnail. This is probably going to be like the whole thing. Genya and Tanjiro's relationship, right? Season 1 was literally like, this dude did not care about anything. And then now it's like they're just friends, right? And it's not even just like they're friends. It seems like they're just bros now. Like, they're just talking it up. They're discussing various different topics, various different things, talking about how they can move this boulder, right? Because this is the whole thing with the Stonehashir's training, is that he wants them to move this boulder with their breathing. And so Genya is able to do it perfectly fine, but then Tanjiro is asking him the secrets of that. Like, how can he do it? How can you do it, but I can't? And I think I just like the chemistry between the two characters, and I really like the writing. It's really good. So this episode goes over what causes the Demon Slayer mark. And it's essentially called repeated motion, right? So it's essentially a state that is caused from one thinking about a traumatic memory or their lost loved ones. And upon that, their mark will activate, granting them strength, great strength, in that moment's duration. That is what Tanjiro uses to push the boulder. And it is very, very, very cool, because it's just something that I think is very important. And that's what explains Season 3, Season 2, and a lot of other things. Yeah, now Tanjiro knows the source of how to do that, and that's pretty much episode 6. So not only do we get the Muzan plan, we get Nakabe, but we also get the relationship between Genya and Tanjiro. But then we also get like the fact that the stone Hashira is literally always doing it. He's essentially a master at doing this technique. I'm trying my best here because there's a lot of information to really talk through. And this is, they put a lot here, man. So now on to episode 7. So episode 7 continues from episode 6 with Inosuke and Zenitsu watching Tanjiro push the boulder. So that same boulder was the same boulder from the last episode, which was episode 6. So after they watched Tanjiro push the boulder successfully, and successfully another time, they both get angry. Specifically, Inosuke gets angry, and at the fact that Tanjiro is beating him, and he decides to push a boulder of his own, which I love because it's just hilarious. I really like the bonds that the characters have this time around, the relationships. They had it in season 3, but this is with every character this time around. It's very cool. And so after a couple of seconds, he successfully, like literally after just a couple of seconds, this guy Inosuke just successfully pushes this boulder. It's literally insane how talented this guy is. And I think that's the reason why I like him so much, is that he really, really, really embodies who I am. And so in the midst of this, Zenitsu's bird comes to him with a piece of paper. After ignoring his bird the first time, his bird pecks him for it, and he decides to listen. And so after being pushed to the brink of dehydration, Tanjiro falls to the ground in need of water, and he declares his own death. He's like, I'm gonna die from dehydration. And Mr. Himejima essentially comes to his rescue and pours water on his face. And he tells Tanjiro that he has completed his training. So he gives Tanjiro the utmost respect because of the fact that he chose the villagers' lives over his own sister in season 3. Which is a great callback because it's like, it makes you have to watch that season to really understand. And it really shows like the kind of person, like I said, like that Tanjiro is. He just instinctively just makes good choices. Mr. Himejima's backstory is shown, and it is, I'm not going to say much about it. I think at that point I'll kind of leave it there. But it is a very, very good backstory. It's a backstory that I would even say, like, that's the reason why I call this guy the MVP. Like, I'm not sure if I'll make him the thumbnail of this video, but it's like, he is literally like the MVP of the season because of that to me. There's such a good character with that backstory, and the idea that he holds the responsibility of every single Hashira to be like, to be their leader is such like, it reminds me of Transformers for some reason. It's so cool. It's so cool. And so essentially he found himself in prison under false claims, and Ubuyashiki brought him out. And that is the reason why he's so faithful to Ubuyashiki. And that is, I'm pretty sure Ubuyashiki did that for every Slayer, saving them from a circumstance of life. And I think that's the reason why I like Ubuyashiki too, is because he believes in the human spirit and the fact that someone can become good again. Is very, very cool guy. Very cool guy. And so essentially after what he went through, Mr. Himejima has deep traumas. And it's made him distrustful with kids. And he explains that to Tanjiro in episode 7, as he's also a child. And he obviously doesn't trust children. But Tanjiro has changed his mind. And he knows that Tanjiro is pure in his heart and in nature. That he has never lied to him on anything. And he's humane and empathetic. And how he's never averted his gaze from him. And so after completing Himejima's training, Tanjiro eats and talks with Genya and Inosuke. And Genya explains that he is Himejima's apprentice. After that, it pans to another scene where Zenitsu is sitting on a boulder. I just have to point out how in the last scene, he was hearing out his bird. And that's a very important detail. At first, he sort of says, I can't hear right now. I'm not really interested. And then he decides to listen to his bird, right? He's like, okay, I'll listen to you. And it makes you think what exactly was on that piece of paper. And so you can kind of assume that something is bad. I mean, at that point in time, I assumed that he was training with the bird, but I thought like Zenitsu locked in and he was like, I'm gonna go and train with this bird. You know, I thought he was gonna take something seriously for once. But it seems that he is like zoned out and he's serious, like completely serious. Like I want to say locked in because that'll instantly give you the idea, but essentially Zenitsu is super serious this time around. And it is also important to note that Zenitsu is also expressionless. He's just completely serious and talking. In the English dub specifically, you normally hear his voice actor screaming and that kind of thing, but this time around his voice actor is just like dead serious in the scene, and it really brings attention because Tanjiro is coming over to Zenitsu in this episode, and he is trying to be compassionate and that kind of thing, but Zenitsu is just like, no, I'm alright. He's just like expressionless and just kind of one note. He's not really saying anything else. Now he's speaking in few words. And Tanjiro essentially comes up to him and states that he hasn't spoken to him in a couple of days. And Zenitsu, based on what you can see, it seems like he's gotten his bearings together and he has a sense of purpose. And so he decides to stay there. And so Tanjiro decides to continue with his training, and so he heads to Giyu. And so he finds Giyu sparring with Sanemi. After the training ending in a draw, Tanjiro points out how Shinazugawa's favorite food is red bean mochi. Now, I just have to say this. Look, this is not really that important, but it adds to the, I guess, likability of the story. I think it's definitely wholesome. It's definitely really cool. Like, really, really good. It's one of the reasons why I like this season. But it's one of those scenes that's just super lighthearted and just funny instantly. It's not the funniest thing in the world, but it's definitely funny because of Sanemi kind of being, like, embarrassed or just insulted, right? And he just absolutely hates this guy. He's like that bastard, right? It's just funny. And so after that event, Shinazugawa walks down a flight of stairs and has a fit over Tanjiro's rambling about his favorite food. And so after he's raging and he's stomping around, he basically freezes and grabs something that's behind him in the air. And when he opens his hand, it's an eye. And that's when he realized that they've been infiltrated. And so after which, Muzan walks towards the master, right? Ubuyashiki. He walks towards Ubuyashiki and his wife by his side. So he's walking in, and Ubuyashiki's basically on his final ropes, and his wife is by his side as Muzan is approaching. And this is probably the best episode. Like, it's not the best particularly. I think the best would go to the previous episode that I mentioned that was the best, like episode 3. But this is definitely like the episode that makes me want to come back. Like this is the episode because man, this episode was so good. That ending was so good. Just so good. The ending was so nice. And so Muzan has this really, really, really long walking cycle. Like it's just this really long walking cycle where he's just walking and there's music playing, and it is just the coolest thing I have ever seen. Like this is going to be an episode that I like rewatch again because like not only the build up towards that point was good because you just like, dude, this guy is pulling up now. He's pulling up right now. Like I was thinking, bro, this was crazy. That was just like a really, really, really good way to end off the episode. Just instantly. Just really good. On to episode 8. Now, I state that this episode is peak. I just want to say, I state that this episode is peak in my notes here. I state that it's peak. I'm not sure why, but apparently I said it's peak. Okay? I said it's the best episode right here. Episode 8. This episode was so peak. It not only explained so much about Muzan, but there was a lot explained about Hashira Ubuyasuki and his family as well, and why there is growing feud between the two groups. Ubuyasuki and Muzan are related not by the same parents, but they share similar blood, and Ubuyasuki's family married priestesses to avoid any semblance with demons, since at the time there was one within their family, so to avoid birthing a demon, Ubuyasuki's family married priestesses. So the scene continues to a flashback. Ubuyasuki first meets Giyomei when he was 14, and Giyomei was 18 at the time. Giyomei feels he is in debt to him because Ubuyasuki freed him from his prison cell and allowed him to become a demon slayer, thus allowing him to find something new to fight for. Ubuyasuki informs Giyomei that he doesn't want the slayers to guard him because he doesn't want to seem selfish, and that the people are more important than himself. So to me, Ubuyasuki seems like a good man. Like, that is clearly for damn sure. Like, this dude has freed people, changed their lives. This dude has literally done some pretty good stuff. And he's also had these same people protect the people rather than himself. So not only is he selfless, but he's also empathetic, and he also cares about the people. He's a very interesting person. After exchanging a couple words with Muzan, Ubuyasuki blows himself up, creates a whole plan. During the walk cycle and after the walk cycle and after the conversation with Ubuyasuki, essentially Ubuyasuki's kids, I believe those are his daughters, they are essentially playing with a ball. That ball essentially holds like a lot of stuff. It holds a lot of stuff. And so they're throwing just a bunch of them. What caused the explosion are these balls. And they essentially explode, and the entire thing explodes, and yeah. And so Muzan gets just wiped out. You'd think. But then, and so Muzan emerges, trying to regenerate, and at this point, it's pretty much clipped because all of the slayers have been alerted to the explosion, and now they're thinking the master is in danger. So they run to the master after being informed by the crows as well, and so they run. And in the midst of this, Tamayo has her arm in Muzan, like her arm in Muzan's stomach. And so essentially, she is holding him down and pretty much has him where she wants him. And at the same time, Giyomei is on the move. And it's quite clear that Giyomei is going to get there pretty fast. And so in the midst of this, they're both exchanging words to each other. And there's a lot of lore here, right? I don't know much about Tamayo, but there's a lot of lore about her. And I guess there's a history with her and Muzan that I'm not aware of. But the history of, I guess, with them that they talk about in this exchange. And it's very cool. Like I said, like there's just a lot of information here. And you could literally miss it. It's very possible to miss this. And I'm not sure what was said, but it's very interesting, and I probably would go back. So, after this exchange, Giyomei appears and launches his chain ball. And in one shot, he's literally in one shot, that upper body is gone. Like literally one strike from Giyomei just destroys this guy's upper body. Crazy. And so he tries to regenerate, which he does do. And all the other Slayers appear. All the other hashiras appear with Tanjiro, including Giyu. And they essentially try to attack Muzan. And in that, during their... Literally, as soon as Giyomei appears, like after he throws the chain ball, I think even before that, like I think after the explosion and Muzan's walking through the explosion, the same exact art that we see during like the Tengen stuff with Gyutaro is literally the same thing here. It's literally the same drawing, similar to Tanjiro versus Hantengu, right? Like same thing with not the dragon thing. The main body, when he fights the main body's like the main body in the main body, when he fights that version, that's the part where you see that line work I'm talking about, where it's very, 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 I think it's all over that season, to be honest, but just know it's really, 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 really top tier. And so he comes in with his chain weapon and he's like spinning it, which is the other side, which is the blade. Basically, he's like spinning it and he's sliding, and it's just, the entire thing is just so like, not only is the OST going hard, but also the imagery. It's just like going together. It's crazy. You have the hashiras coming together. You have Tanjiro coming together. Everything's going insane, and then just boom, right? Just boom, and they all get just teleported. As soon as they're about to attack, Sonomi's like literally the closest one, I believe. It's like it makes you think, like, it's like, what if they didn't get teleported? Like, what if they didn't? Like, what would have happened to him? Like, would he gotten destroyed? And what, like if Giyomei's like chain ball can just destroy this guy's upper body, then what will happen to like the rest of his body? Like, would he get destroyed? Or like what would have happened? Just all elements at once. I'm just very curious, like, because I think that's what Muzan is, bro. I think he's just a cheater. He's got all these things. He got all this stuff happening. Like, he has all this stuff happening, and still he's got to resort to this. He's got to resort to dipping. He can't just take the heat. Yeah, it's pretty crazy because he's essentially like, as soon as that sound plays, the string plays, they all just get dropped in there, like into this just gigantic place with a bunch of rooms. So they all just fall down there. And so in the midst of this falling cycle, and you see all the Slayers get teleported, and stuff like that, and including Zenitsu, Inosuke, and all these characters, Giyu yells at Tanjiro. And this is my favorite part of the episode, and I think this is the reason why I call it peak, is because you can tell that their relationship means something because of the fact that Giyu calls Tanjiro's name. And so he basically calls Tanjiro, and Tanjiro essentially realizes what he's supposed to do. And so he yells at Muzan, essentially doing the same thing that he's always done. Not only has he done it to Akaza, but he's done it to the main body of Hantengu, because he's trying to run away and he was calling him a coward. It's very, 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 very cool. Like, this was the yell, very similar to the Hantengu yell, where it was like, boom. And as soon as the Akaza yell, was like, those like the 3 important ones where it's like, it hits because like he's calling him a coward and it pierces his soul. I'm gonna just read what my last statement was. And I say, man, what a season. Episode 8 is just so good. And I can't wait for what's next. So far, for me, this season was just really good. Expanding on each Hashira and what makes them different from one another. There are various pieces in each episode that makes this season so appealing to me. But most importantly, it's Giyomei's backstory and Ubuyashiki's relationship with Muzan and their history that has been built until this point. So far, I'm very impressed, and I can't wait for episode 9 of English Dub Demon Slayer season. So I realized that there's no episodes coming out, so I just looked and I realized there's only like 8 episodes, which is definitely not what I'm used to, but it's understandable because after this point, like, there cannot be another season 3. There cannot be any, like, they need to have to actually make sure that this is going to be 10 out of 10, because After this point, it's literally like just manga content. It's content that is supposed to be the deciding factor of the story. Like, this is something that has been built up since season 1. This is something that has been said to be the final say in the story. And there's a lot of things that happen in the next season. I'm not going to talk about any manga stuff, but there's a lot of things that happen. I know about everything, but there's a lot of things that happen that not only builds Zenitsu as a character, also builds Inosuke as a character, also builds pretty much every character on this roster is being built after this point. Whether they die or win, they're all going to be shaped by the events that are supposed to take place. It's very important. And so this is a season, I must say. Just presentation was perfect. Very similar to season 2. Presentation was perfect. Definitely the bomber soundtrack. Season 3's soundtrack, I think the best soundtrack for sure is, I definitely would say, is Mitsudi's theme. I'll say the best overall is going to be the Hantengu OC, where he's like on the final slash. Like, that is the one where he falls to the ground after Nezuko being burnt by the sun, and then he's like holding the sword, and the camera pans his face. Such a good scene right there. So good. You feel it. It's triumphant. It's got everything riding on it, and I think that's what we need. Like, that was the scene that I think saved season 3. It literally saved it. Like, as mid as the other stuff were, that was the scene. That was definitely the scene right there. Nothing beats that OST for Tanjiro literally cutting Hantengo's head off. Like, nothing beats that. Like, that is the best. But this season changed, I think, everything. Like, this has put Demon Slayer back on the map. This has put Demon Slayer back on the map because this right here is just so good. Like, just so good. Like, I never felt so inclined to watch another episode before. I will say that this season is really good. It is definitely outstanding what they did with the story structure, the structure of each episode, and how it focuses on a Hashira. This is what I'm sure everyone wants from Demon Slayer, how the Hashiras are the main focal point. There are basically the keepers of the next generation. They're the ones who teach these breeding styles, and so we want to see what they can do. And so here we see that, right? There's a scene in the season, I didn't talk about this, but there's a scene in the season where Shinobu gets angry because she has to work with Tamayo. There's scenes that really, really explain these characters and what they stand for, that really build on these characters as they were built up, not really built up, but they were shown in season 1. Now the soundtrack is, I would say it's very good. I can't think of any tracks that are really my favorite. I haven't really felt as compelled as season 3 per se, but I can definitely say that there are some really good tracks. Like, I would say the one that played in the final episode, or the one that played where they were doing the airplane contest, or the one that played when Sanemi and the Snake Hashira was raiding this like mansion, I guess. The one that plays when Giyomei is pushing the boulder. There's a lot of tracks here that are very, very moving. I think the structure of the music is just, it's good, man. Like, it's what I expect from a show that focuses on swordsmen and slaying demons. It's just perfect. It's just perfect. It really builds on that. So the drawings are perfect. Everything it just falls in line with the season, and I'm talking about this based on a Demon Slayer season. This is obviously not going to be for everybody, but I can say personally that this is a good season. So I talk about the music, everything like that. I can talk about the English dub. I can say that it's definitely very good. I can say it's very good. I think it's more interesting for me personally, since I like English dubs. It's because I get to see the choices that are made. I get to see why I get to at least understand why they're being made. Like, sometimes let's say I disagree with a certain choice, I can be like, why exactly would they make this choice? Why exactly would they make that decision? And it becomes clear to me later on exactly why they would make that decision. Either the character sounds this way in English, or they may sound this way in English, or this is the way we hear the character, or something like that, or the person performs his voice this way, and it sounds great for the character, or something like that. Like, I get to see that with this kind of show, and there are many other shows I want to talk about that have this. So whenever I get to talk about a show, I like to talk about this English dub, as I really want to draw attention to that, as I personally feel English dubs aren't really talked about as much. But that's all what I think. But I will say this show is great, and I really like its English dub. Now I'm on my final section of this video. The overall review. The overall review and rating section of this video, which is my final section of this video. Whenever I talk about an anime, I'm not looking for anything of saga. I'm not looking for anything of the sort. No, I just want to see skill. I want to see talent. I want to see something. I look for an endearing story of some kind. As I am someone who reads books, I like to look at what the show is about. I'm very open to that kind of thing. There's some things I don't understand when it comes to certain kinds of stories, but I am willing to understand it. Overall, this season is just perfect. Like, I can go back and watch it. I can find out some other information I didn't know about now. I can always do something like that. I can always pay attention to the details somewhere else. I can always go back and look for more. But this is just my base take on this season and what I think about it. The soundtrack is really good. The animation is really good. There's a full-on budget increase when you expect it to. The base animation is just perfect. Basically, just everything to me is just really good. The English dub is great. The opening, it's not really my kind of intro, but it definitely fits the story for sure. I would say it's a good opening. Is it my favorite? No, necessarily no, but I do like the song. It's definitely a good song, but it's just not my kind of opening. But it's good. This season had a lot of information to give. It had a lot of things to explain. It had a lot of things to tell away and for you to go and figure out. And so I'm sure people are doing that already. But it is definitely a season that is very good. With all those things said, what are my negatives, right? What are the things I didn't like? I can definitely say that, for one, the episode count, I'm not used to that. I'm usually used to 12 or 24. But considering the fact that they're going to go into movies, I don't really know if that is really still a complaint I can make. Overall, the season is a 8 out of 8. It is a perfect. It is a perfect anime. It's perfect. It is very good. It has a perfect presentation. So yeah, overall, it's going to be 8 for me. I think it's a very, very good season, and it's good. I usually don't really take this long with videos, but yeah,